"That's not your nurse." Naomi Carter said it low, from the foot of the bed. Arthur Vance turned his head an inch. It was the only part of him that still moved fast. "That's not your nurse," she said again, quieter. Across the room, the woman in teal scrubs did not look up from the medication cart. She was counting pills into a little cup. Careful, practiced, wrong. It was 3:10 on a Thursday. The sick room smelled of lavender and rubbing alcohol, curtains half drawn against the glare. Arthur Vance, 68, had not walked on his own in 5 weeks. He had learned to listen instead. Naomi was 9. A plain cardigan, neat twists, a drawing pad hugged to her chest with both arms. She was not supposed to be past the kitchen door. She came anyway. On the afternoons, her grandmother worked late. Her grandmother was Della Okoro, the estate's cook for 11 years. Della had told her once, stirring a pot, not looking up. Keep what you actually saw, not what you were told. Naomi had never forgotten it. The nurse finished the pill cup and turned. Her badge caught the window light. G. Adeyemi, it read, block letters, a small photo laminated beside the name. She smiled at Naomi, the way adults smile at children in the way. "Sweetheart, visitors wait in the hall," she said. Her voice was even, too even. Naomi did not move. She looked at the badge, then at the woman's face, then back at the badge, the way she checked a math problem twice. I watch rooms most people walk straight through. Sick rooms, kitchens, the space behind a cart, nobody looks at twice. Call me the quiet witness. That afternoon, one grown man could not lift his own arm, and one small girl was the only person counting anything correctly. Naomi opened her drawing pad, past the pencil sketches, to 2 taped photographs near the back. Both showed a hospital badge. Both said, G. Adeyemi. The faces above the name were not the same woman. "I took this one in March," she said, tapping the first photo, when the real nurse started. She tapped the second. "I took this one yesterday." She held the pad up so Arthur, propped on 3 pillows, could see both at once. Arthur's eyes moved from photo to photo, slow, the way everything moved through him now. He had a stroke in April. Words came out thick some days, but his eyes were still his own, and his eyes did the arithmetic she had already done. The nurse crossed the room fast, 3 steps, and reached for the pad. "That's an old picture, honey. People change their hair." Naomi pulled it back against her chest. "You didn't change your hair. You changed your whole face." Arthur made a sound low in his throat. Not words yet. His right hand, the one that still obeyed him, crept an inch across the blanket toward Naomi. She saw it and stepped closer, out of the nurse's reach, and set the pad where he could see it again. "The first nurse had a gap in her front teeth," Naomi said. "This one doesn't. The first nurse wore glasses on a chain. This one doesn't." She was not raising her voice. She never raised her voice. She just kept counting out loud. The impostor's smile did not move, but something behind it went very still. "I need to finish his medication," she said, and reached for the little cup on the tray. Arthur's hand found Naomi's sleeve and closed around it. Weak, but closed. He squeezed. Once. Naomi looked down at his hand on her sleeve, then up at his face. His mouth worked. One word came out clear enough to hear. "Believe," he said. "Her." The nurse froze with the cup half raised. It is a small thing. A sick man's hand finding a child's sleeve. It does not look like evidence. But I have learned that the first believer in any true thing is rarely the loudest voice in the room. It is the weakest one, spending what little he has left. Della's voice carried down the hallway, calling Naomi's name, the way it did every afternoon at this hour, right on schedule. Naomi answered, loud enough to be heard, and slid the pad under her cardigan before the nurse could see it move. Leaving, she thought again of 2 voices she had caught near the pantry the night before, low and hurried, a name and a date she had not understood yet. "Coming, Grandma," she called, and walked out steady, not fast, the way she had practiced not looking rushed. Behind her, the nurse set the cup down, untouched, and turned toward the door, watching the space where the girl had just been standing. She had seen the pad. She did not yet know what was on the second page, the pill counts Naomi had started keeping without being asked. But she had seen the two photographs, side by side, and she had seen a child who did not blink. The kitchen was Della's whole kingdom, copper pans on hooks, a radio low on the counter. Naomi climbed onto a stool and set the drawing pad flat between them. "Grandma, look at this. Really look." Della wiped her hands on her apron before she touched anything, the way she handled every fragile thing in that house. She studied the first photo, then the second, holding the pad at arm's length, then close, the way she read fine print. "Where did you get these?" she said. Not a question, a checking of facts. Naomi told her, "The March photo, taken the day the new nurse started, everyone smiling at the front steps. The second, taken yesterday, at the medication cart." Della crossed to the refrigerator. Taped under a magnet shaped like a lemon was a welcome letter from the home care agency, 3 months old, curling at one corner. A small headshot was printed in the corner. G. Adeyemi, RN. She peeled the letter free and set it beside the pad. 3 faces now. The agency photo, Naomi's March photo, Naomi's photo from yesterday. Della's eyes moved between them, slow, the way Naomi's had moved between Arthur's pillows and the badge. "The agency picture and your March picture," Della said. "Same woman." She tapped the third photo. "This one isn't her." Her voice had gone flat, the way it went flat when a delivery truck brought the wrong order and she would not raise her voice about it. Only fix it. I have watched grandmothers do arithmetic before. It rarely looks like fear. It looks like a woman lining up 3 photographs on a countertop, quiet, unhurried, building a case one fact at a time before she lets herself feel anything about it. "The name's the same on all 3, Naomi said. G. Adeyemi, but her face isn't." Della nodded slowly. "A badge doesn't grow a new face. A person does." She folded the agency letter and set it inside her apron pocket. Careful, like evidence she already knew to protect. "Did anyone tell you the nurse changed?" Della asked. Naomi shook her head. "Nobody told me anything. I just noticed." Della's mouth tightened. In this house, a staff change usually came with a memo, a phone call, a name on the weekly schedule taped by the pantry. There had been no memo. Della checked the schedule herself, still taped where it always was. It read, G. Adeyemi, RN, days, no update, no new name. Whoever had put a different woman behind that badge had not gone through the agency and had not gone through Della. That means somebody in this house let her in, Della said, half to herself. She thought of who held keys, who managed the staff calendar, who signed for deliveries at the side gate. Only a few names fit that description, and she kept every one of them to herself for now. Naomi watched her grandmother's face change, the careful stillness cracking just slightly at the edges. "Are you scared?" she asked. Della looked at her granddaughter a long moment. "I'm careful," she said. "There's a difference. You taught me that, actually. It was true, in its way." Naomi had learned it from Della first. Write down what you see, not what you're told. And now the lesson had come back around. Grandmother borrowing the granddaughter's own steadiness to hold her hands still. Della slid the 3 photos into a kitchen drawer under the flour sacks, out of easy sight. "You did right showing me," she said. "But you can't wave that pad at anybody else yet. Not till I know who put her here, and why." "What about Mr. Vance?" Naomi asked. "He heard me. He squeezed my sleeve." Della's face softened, then hardened again. "Mr. Vance can't lift a phone right now, baby. That's exactly why somebody thought this was safe to try." She said it plain, the way she said most things. A man weak enough to not fight back was a man easy enough to rob quiet. Not with a gun. With a clipboard, a badge, a signature waiting to be pressed into his hand on a bad day. Outside, a car pulled up the side drive, slow on the gravel. Della glanced through the window. A pale sedan, glossy, unfamiliar in that spot at this hour. Simone Vance's car, but earlier than her usual visit, and Grant Lennox's car right behind it. Della moved fast for a woman who never looked like she was hurrying. She swept the pad off the counter and pressed it into Naomi's hands. "Upstairs. Now. Keep this between us only. You hear me?" Naomi understood. She was gone before the side door opened, up the back stairs 2 at a time, pad against her chest again, the 2 badge photos riding safe inside it, like something she now knew was worth protecting, with her whole small body. Della smoothed her apron and turned to the stove, stirring a pot that did not need stirring. The oldest trick a person in her position had for looking like nothing at all had just happened in her kitchen. I want you to notice what had just been built in 20 minutes. It wasn't proof of a crime yet, only proof of a fact. 1 badge, 2 faces, no memo. A grandmother and a granddaughter had done, quietly, what an entire household staff had failed to check. That night, after the dishes, Della found Naomi at the small table in the staff quarters, drawing pad open, not drawing. "You said something earlier," Della said. "Voices near the pantry. Last night. Tell me exactly." Naomi told it plain, the way Della had taught her. 2 voices, low, past 10. A man's and a woman's. She had gone for water and stopped in the hallway, out of sight, because something in the low, hurried way they spoke made her feet stop before her mind caught up. The woman said, "Before the review," Naomi said. The man said, "She'll do exactly what she's told. She needs the money." Then the woman said a name. Grace. She said, "Grace already left. Nobody's going to ask twice." Della went very still over the sink. "Grace," she repeated. "That's the name on the agency letter. G for Grace." She set down the dish towel. "Grace Adeyemi. Nobody told me she left. Nobody told me anything. The 2 voices," Naomi said, "belonged to Mrs. Vance and Mr. Lennox. She knew them by sound the way she knew every adult in the house, footsteps and cadence memorized without meaning to, the way children learn a building's rhythm long before they learn its secrets. Simone Vance was Arthur's wife, 34 to his 68, married 2 years. Grant Lennox managed the estate, the schedules, the household accounts, the side gate. Della had watched them stand a little too close at the holiday party and said nothing, because it was not her business. It was her business now. "A review," Della said slowly. "Mr. Vance has been getting stronger some days, sharper." She thought of the folder that came by courier last month, thick, from a law office, sitting unopened on the study desk for 2 weeks. A competency review meant a doctor would sit with Arthur and decide, on paper, whether his mind was fit to sign things. If it went one way, whatever documents were waiting in that folder would need his real, clear signature. If it went the other way, someone else's signature would do. "She needs the money," Naomi repeated the second voice's words. "He needs the money," Della corrected softly, thinking of Lennox, whose salary did not explain his new watch, his new car, the confidence with which he moved through rooms that were not his. 2 adults, a deadline, and a hired stranger wearing a licensed woman's badge. Della laid the pieces on the table the way she laid ingredients before cooking, in order, each one useless alone, dangerous together. Keep a man foggy. Keep him compliant. Keep him signing. I have sat across from many people doing this exact arithmetic. Proof on one side, power on the other, and a very small number of witnesses willing to add it up out loud. Most people look away from a sum this size. Della did not look away. "I'm calling the agency in the morning," Della said. "Not the house line. My own phone. On my own time." She wrote the agency's number from the letter onto a scrap of paper and folded it into her apron, the way she had folded the badge photos. Naomi watched her grandmother's hands, steady even now, and understood something she would not have words for until she was older. That steadiness was not the absence of fear. It was fear, given a job to do, and done anyway. The next morning, Della called before her shift, standing outside on the delivery step where the reception was clearest. A receptionist answered, cheerful, unbothered. "Grace Adeyemi? Let me check her file." A long pause, then careful. "Ma'am, may I ask why you're asking?" "I'm calling from a client household," Della said. "We were told she was reassigned." Another pause, longer. "That's strange," the receptionist said. "Nothing in our system shows a reassignment. Grace is still listed as active on this case. Let me get my supervisor." Della's stomach turned over once, hard. Still listed as active. No reassignment on file. No resignation. No record of her leaving at all. A woman on paper was still working a job that a different woman was, in fact, working in her place, under her name, in that house. The supervisor came on, more careful still. She confirmed it. Grace Adeyemi hadn't called in a transfer, had not requested time off, had simply stopped showing up to check in 2 weeks ago. The agency had left 3 messages. None had been returned. "We assumed she'd found other work and didn't want the paperwork," the supervisor said. "It happens sometimes." Della did not correct her yet. She only asked one thing. "Do you have a photo of Grace Adeyemi on file? I'd like to see it, if that's allowed." The photo arrived by email within the hour, forwarded to Della's own account. Nothing routed through the house system Lennox managed. It matched the March photo in Naomi's pad exactly. Same gap in the front teeth. Same glasses on a thin chain. It did not match the woman counting pills at Arthur Vance's bedside that very afternoon. Della printed both photos at the library on her lunch break, 20 minutes each way, telling no one where she was going. She came home with proof now, not suspicion. A real nurse, unreachable for 2 weeks, still listed as employed. A different woman wearing that nurse's badge in a dying man's sick room. And 2 adults in that house who had said her name in the dark, like something already buried. "What do we do now?" Naomi asked that evening, pad closed on her lap. Della thought a long moment. "We don't do anything alone," she said. "We find someone who checks on nurses for a living. But first, baby, we keep watching. Quietly. Like you already were." The clock had started the moment a receptionist said still listed as active. Somewhere, a woman who had not called in, not quit, not vanished by choice, was 2 weeks overdue for anyone official to ask where she actually was. 2 days passed quiet on the surface. Underneath, the balance of the house had moved. The nurse who was not Grace Adeyemi started turning up in doorways that had nothing to do with medication. The kitchen, the staff stairs, the hallway outside Della's small room. "Your granddaughter's a curious little thing," she said to Della on the second morning, pouring coffee she did not need, watching Della's face for anything it might give away. "Always got that notebook. What does she draw in there anyway?" Della kept her voice easy, the way she kept it for difficult deliverymen and difficult days. "Horses, mostly. Cartoon animals. You know how children are." She did not stop stirring the oatmeal. Her hands did not shake, though something under her ribs had gone tight. The nurse smiled and let it go, that time. But that afternoon, Naomi found her own small room slightly wrong. A drawer not quite closed the way she left it. The drawing pad on her desk turned 90 degrees from where she had set it that morning. She did not touch anything. She stood in the doorway and looked, the way she had learned to look at a badge, a plate number, a page of pencil lines, not with panic, with attention. Someone had been in her room. Someone had looked and not found what they wanted. That evening she told Della, quiet, in the pantry where no one else stood close. "She's looking for the pad." Della's jaw tightened. "Then we don't let the pad hold everything anymore. One thing, one place. That's how it gets taken." They worked it out at the kitchen table after Arthur's evening medication rounds, heads bent close under one lamp. Della had learned this from nowhere official, only from a lifetime of protecting things that mattered by never keeping them all in the same hand. Naomi peeled one badge photo free from the pad and taped it, small and unremarkable, inside the back cover of a picture book she kept by her bed. A book no adult in that house would think twice about opening. The second photo stayed in the pad itself, alongside pages of horses and cartoon animals, hidden in plain sight among 100 ordinary child's drawings. Della's old phone, the one with the emailed proof from the agency, went into a sealed bag inside a flour canister. Nobody but Della ever opened. 3 places now. A photo split from its pair could look, to a searching eye, like nothing at all. One girl's badge sketch among many. One grandmother's old phone in a kitchen drawer full of clutter. Nothing whole enough to explain. Nothing whole enough to steal. I want to be honest about what this moment cost. A 9-year-old learning to hide evidence in her own bedroom is not a normal Tuesday. But she did not cry over it. She treated it the way she treated the badge itself, a problem with a solution. And she found the solution. 2 mornings later, the nurse tried a different door. She caught Naomi alone near the laundry room and crouched to her level, the way adults do when they want a child to feel spoken to instead of spoken at. "I heard you take a lot of pictures," she said. "I like drawing," Naomi said, which was true, and said nothing else, which was also true. The nurse's smile stayed fixed. Pictures of people can get mixed up sometimes. Old ones, new ones. You wouldn't want to confuse Mr. Vance with something wrong, would you? It was not a threat, not out loud. It was close enough to one that Naomi understood it exactly. She looked at the woman's badge instead of her face, the way she had that first afternoon, and said nothing else at all, and walked around her toward the stairs. The nurse watched her go and did not follow. Following a child down a hallway in daylight, in a house with a cook, a groundskeeper, and cameras at the gate, was a risk even a patient professional would not take yet. She had time. She thought she had time. What she did not know was that Della had already reached the agency, already held 2 matching photographs and a supervisor's confirmed silence about a nurse who had stopped checking in 2 weeks ago. The watching had already turned around behind her without her noticing. That is often how it goes, in my experience. The person doing the watching believes they still hold every card, right up until the moment they realize the quietest people in the house have been keeping their own count the whole time. Naomi began sleeping with the picture book under her pillow, not out of fear exactly, more the way a person keeps a hand near something precious. Della checked on her twice a night now, a habit she did not explain, and Naomi did not ask her to. On the 3rd day, the nurse tried the medication cart differently. Smaller doses skipped some hours, larger ones pushed at others, a pattern Naomi could not read on a chart but could read in Arthur. His good hours, the ones where his eyes tracked clearly, grew shorter. Naomi noticed that too. She had started, without anyone teaching her, keeping a second column in the back of her pad next to the badge photos. Dates, times, how many pills went into the little cup, and how clear or foggy Mr. Vance seemed each time she visited. Nobody had asked her to count pills. She did it the same reason she had photographed a badge in March, because her grandmother had taught her that a fact, written down the moment it happens, is worth more than a memory argued about later. Watched, cornered twice, and neither time caught. That was where the 4th day left them. A split trail of evidence in 3 hiding places, a pill count nobody knew she kept, and a woman circling closer without ever quite closing the distance. Della called the agency a 2nd time, 4 days after the first, from the same delivery step, the same careful distance from the house. She asked one direct question this time. "Has anyone actually spoken to Grace Adeyemi, in person or on the phone, since she stopped checking in?" The supervisor's voice had changed since the first call, less breezy now, more careful. We've tried her cell 6 times. It rings through to voicemail. Her landlord says her apartment looks untouched. Ma'am, I have to ask, is there a reason you're pressing on this? Della told her everything, plain, in order, the way Naomi had learned to tell things. 2 badge photos, 1 name, 2 faces, a conversation overheard about a review and a deadline. A nurse still marked active who had not been heard from in over 2 weeks. The line went quiet a moment. Then the supervisor said the sentence that changed the shape of everything. That's not a resignation pattern. That's a missing person pattern. I'm required to report this to the state board today. They may involve the police. Della hung up and stood on the step a long moment, the phone loose in her hand. Not fired. Not quit. Not vanished by choice into a new job somewhere better. A woman had gone silent the exact week a stranger started wearing her badge in this house. I try not to say things I cannot stand behind, and I will not stand behind guessing. But I will tell you, the shape a fact like this takes in a person's chest. Grace Adeyemi had not walked away from her own life. Someone had taken it from her, and was still wearing it. That is the only time in this whole account I will admit what I felt, sitting with that fact. It frightened me, plainly, the way it frightens any person to realize a stranger's whole identity can be worn like a coat, while she herself is somewhere, nobody is looking. Della went back inside and found Naomi in the kitchen doing homework at the same table where they had laid out 3 photographs days before. She sat down across from her granddaughter, and, for the first time, let her voice shake a little while she explained. The real nurse isn't just gone, Della said. Nobody's heard from her in 2 weeks. Her landlord hasn't seen her. Her phone just rings. The agency's calling the state board today. Naomi set her pencil down carefully, the way she set down anything that suddenly mattered more than it had a second ago. Is she okay? Naomi asked. Della did not lie to her. I don't know, baby. That's what scares me. It was the plainest thing either of them had said all week, and saying it out loud did not make it smaller. Naomi opened her pad to the pill count page without being asked and slid it across the table. 2 weeks of dates, doses, and how clear or foggy Arthur had seemed at each one. Della had not known she was keeping it. She read it twice. The doses climbed steadily across those 2 weeks, a little more each few days, matched almost exactly against days when Arthur's eyes, by Naomi's own careful notes, had gone dimmer and slower. It proved no poisoning, only a pattern, and a pattern was enough to act on. This is a timeline, Della said quietly, running a finger down the dates. 14 days. Same 14 days the agency can't reach her. She looked at her granddaughter with something between pride and fear she did not have a clean word for. That night, Naomi lay awake longer than usual, picture book under her pillow, and thought about something she had noticed and not mentioned yet, because it had not seemed important until tonight. The old guest cottage past the hedge line, dark for a year, had its porch light on twice that week. She had seen it from her window both times, late, after the rest of the house had gone quiet. A single light, on for an hour, then off. She had thought nothing of it. Groundskeepers sometimes worked odd hours. She told Della about it the next morning anyway, because that was the rule now. Write it down. Say it out loud. Let someone else decide if it mattered. Della went still when she heard it. The guest cottage was Lennox's to manage, keys and all. Closed to guests since a plumbing failure the previous winter. No reason for a light there at all, let alone twice in 1 week, let alone late enough that only a child looking out a window would ever see it. She did not go near the cottage. She did not send Naomi anywhere near it either. She wrote the detail down, instead, in her own hand, on the same folded page as the timeline, and decided this was a fact for someone official, not for a grandmother and a granddaughter alone. The next call Della made was not to the agency. It was to the police non-emergency line, the number printed on a magnet by the phone that nobody in that kitchen had ever expected to use. She reported a missing licensed nurse a mismatched badge, and a lit window where no one should be. The officer who took the report was careful and unhurried, the way officials are when they are not yet sure a thing is real. He said a welfare check would be logged, a state board complaint cross-referenced, someone would follow up within the week. Within the week was not fast enough for the fear sitting in Della's chest, but it was a door opening where there had been none. A file now existed outside that house. A name, Grace Adeyemi, was now attached to an open case, not just a closed one. Nobody had noticed. Arthur, that same evening, had one of his worse hours. His words came slower. His hand did not find Naomi's sleeve the way it had that first afternoon. The nurse adjusted his pillow with brisk, competent hands and told Della he was simply tired. Della watched those hands a long moment. Competent hands, she thought. Trained hands. Whoever this woman was, she was not a stranger to medicine, only a stranger to the name she was wearing. That made her more dangerous, not less. And Della said as much to no one but herself. Somewhere outside the reach of that house, a woman who had spent 2 weeks unreachable, unheard, and unaccounted for, was still, as far as anyone could yet prove, alive. A welfare check had been logged. A cottage light had been noticed. The clock had a second hand on it now. 14 days is a long time to be missing, and a short time to be found. Both were true at once, that night, in a kitchen where a grandmother folded a page into her apron, and a girl, finally, slept. 2 mornings later, the nurse called in sick, hoarse over the phone, a sudden cold. A relief aide from a different agency covered the shift instead, unfamiliar with the household, easy to redirect. Della took the opening the moment it opened. She asked the relief aide, politely, to hold off the mid-morning dose an hour. He likes his tea first, settles his stomach, Della said, which was true, and also not the reason. The aide, new and eager to please, agreed without question. By 10 o'clock, Arthur's eyes had cleared in a way Della had not seen in 2 weeks. He tracked the room. He turned his head fully toward the door when Della knocked. No lag behind the motion, no fog behind the focus. Della brought Naomi in and closed the door behind them both. "Mr. Vance," she said, "my granddaughter has something to show you. It matters. Please look carefully." Arthur nodded, slow but certain, and pushed himself an inch higher against the pillows. Wise Naomi set the picture book open on his lap first, the taped photo inside its back cover, then laid the drawing pad beside it with the second photo. 2 faces. 1 printed name. She did not explain right away. She let him look. His good hand moved between the 2 photos, touching first one, then the other, the way a man double-checks a signature against a forgery. "This," he said, tapping the March photo, voice slow but clear. "Gap tooth. Glasses. I remember her." He tapped the second photo. "This one? No gap. No glasses." He looked up at Naomi. "You knew. That first day. You told me before I could tell myself." His hand found her sleeve again, steadier this time than it had been in weeks. Della told him the rest, careful and complete. The agency, the missing weeks, the welfare check now filed, the cottage light Naomi had seen twice from her window. Arthur listened without interrupting, the old sharpness in his face returning like color to a room the shades had been drawn against. "Simone," he said finally, and it was not a question either. Della did not answer it for him. She only said, "There's a folder that's been on your desk 3 weeks, from a law office. Nobody's told me what's in it." Arthur's jaw tightened. He remembered the folder now, or remembered enough. A competency review, requested through his own physician's office, timed to a signature deadline on a set of documents he had never been allowed to read clearly. "She's been waiting for me, Foggy," he said. "Every time I started to clear, that woman changed my dose." He said woman, not nurse, deliberately, the word choice its own small verdict. He looked at Naomi. "You're the only one who wasn't fooled." Just past 11, Simone came in with the folder under one arm. smiling the smile she wore for company, and stopped 2 steps inside the door when she saw Arthur sitting up straighter than he had in a month, eyes tracking hers directly. "Arthur, darling, you look wonderful," she said, recovering fast, moving toward the bed. "I brought the papers we talked about. The lawyer just needs your signature today. It's simple. It's just—" Arthur raised his good hand, not sharply, but enough. "I'm not signing anything today," he said, each word deliberate. "Not until I know why my nurse of 3 months is a different woman than the one who started in March." Simone's smile did not move, but her eyes flicked once, fast, toward the door. "Arthur, you're confused. The medication does that sometimes." "I am not confused," he said, and the clarity in his voice filled the room in a way his silence had not in weeks. "I am, for the first time in a long while, entirely clear." Simone's grip tightened on the folder. She looked at Della, then at Naomi, and something calculating crossed her face before the courteous mask came back down over it. "We'll talk when you're rested," she said, and left without the signature she had come for. The door had barely closed before Arthur exhaled, long and shaking, the effort of that clarity costing him something visible. "How long do I have like this?" he asked Della, meaning the lucid hour, not the day. Della had no answer for him, and neither did he. "Say it now, then," Della said gently. "Everything you want on record. Say it now, in case." Arthur nodded, and, slow but exact, dictated while Della wrote. He had never met the current nurse before she walked into his room. He did not authorize any change. He had not signed, and would not sign, anything under her care. He signed that single page himself, his real hand, his real signature, dated and witnessed by Della and by the relief aide called in to confirm what she had seen of his clarity that morning. It was the only signature in this whole account that mattered. "The girl who notices," Arthur said, looking at Naomi once more before the fog began, visibly, to creep back in behind his eyes. "Don't let them tell you that you imagined this. You didn't. You were the only one paying attention in this entire house." Naomi held his hand until his grip loosened into the softer, slower one that meant the clear hour was ending. She stayed dry-eyed through it. This whole strange month had taught her that watching was the job, and she had done it. Della folded Arthur's signed statement into the same apron pocket that already held 2 photographs, a supervisor's confirmation, and a 2-week pill count timeline. It was becoming, without either of them planning it, an evidence file built by a cook and her granddaughter at a kitchen table. By noon, the relief aide had gone home, and the regular nurse, her cold plainly much better now, returned for the evening shift, smiling the same practiced smile, checking the medication cart as if nothing in that room had changed while she was away. But something had changed, entirely, and it was not visible on any chart she carried. A man who had signed nothing for weeks had, that morning, signed exactly one true thing, and named exactly one true witness, and neither of those facts could be taken back now. 3 days after the welfare check was logged, a state nursing board investigator named Ana Ortiz called the house directly, asking to speak with whoever had filed the report. Della took the call in the pantry, door shut, voice low and exact. Ortiz did not waste words. She had Grace Adeyemi's missing file open, the agency's confirmation, the police report cross-referenced with it that morning. "I understand you have documentation," she said. "I'd like to see all of it. Today, if possible." Della met her at the side gate an hour later, away from the main house, away from Lennox's usual line of sight. She brought the full apron's worth, 2 badge photographs, the agency's emailed confirmation, Arthur's signed statement, and Naomi's drawing pad, opened to the pill count page. Ortiz studied the pad longest. Dates in a child's careful hand, doses counted, notes on how clear or foggy a man had seemed each visit. "Who kept this?" she asked, already suspecting the answer from the handwriting. My granddaughter, Della said. Nobody asked her to. She just does that. This is better documentation than I get from half the facilities I investigate, Ortiz said, and meant it as the plain compliment it was, not flattery. She photographed every page, careful not to remove the original from Della's hands, chain of custody already forming in her mind. Then Della told her about the cottage. The light on twice, late, in a building closed since winter, managed only by Grant Lennox, no reason for anyone to be inside it at all. Ortiz's pen stopped moving. She looked up. Show me exactly where, she said, and this time her voice had lost its careful, procedural calm, just for a moment, replaced by something more urgent. Della pointed past the hedge line, toward the low roof line barely visible from the gate. Ortiz did not go alone. She called it in, 2 patrol officers meeting her at the property's edge within the hour. A warrant requested on the strength of a missing person report, a cottage with no authorized use, and a light seen twice by a credible witness. They found the door bolted from the outside, a padlock newer than the building around it. Inside, in a single furnished room meant for guests, they found Grace Adeyemi, thinner than her photograph, exhausted but alive, and the moment the door opened, immediately, fiercely relieved. She had been there 12 days. Lennox had approached her at first with a payoff, she told the officers later, an offer to disappear quietly for a month, while someone else covered her shift. More money than she'd ever been offered for anything. She had refused. Refusing had not ended it. It had only changed the offer into a threat, and the threat into a locked door, food brought twice a day by a man who would not meet her eyes, and a phone taken from her the same afternoon she said no. Grace had spent those 12 days doing the only thing available to a licensed nurse locked in a room, keeping track. Meals, times, the sound of a car engine that came and went on a schedule she'd started to memorize, the same discipline Naomi had used with a pencil 3 rooms away. When Ortiz asked her, gently, what she wanted found in that house, Grace did not ask about herself first. Check his medication log, she said. Whoever's wearing my badge, check what she's actually giving him. I trained for years to know what I'd never give a man that week. Back at the estate, officers with a separate warrant searched Lennox's office in the manor. The desk he kept locked, the filing cabinet he alone had the key to. Inside, they found drafts of a power of attorney document, 3 versions, each one closer to a signature that was not Arthur's own handwriting. Beside the drafts sat a folder of forged reference letters used to place the impostor nurse through a side arrangement with the agency's regional office, bypassing the background check that would have caught instantly that the woman was not a licensed nurse at all, only trained enough to be convincing. Her real name surfaced within the hour, run against a state registry that had no record of Grace Adeyemi's license under any name but Grace's own. Mara Reyes, 33, a former hospital aide with a suspended certification, hired outside every proper channel for exactly this kind of work. Ortiz laid it all out later that day for the detectives who would carry the case forward. A licensed nurse held 12 days against her will. An uncertified impostor wearing her identity to dose a vulnerable man toward a forged signature. 2 conspirators managing the calendar around a deadline they had set themselves. 2 badges. One held nurse. A dated pad kept by a child who never once thought of herself as a witness, only as someone who wrote down what she actually saw. Put together, it was not a suspicion anymore. It was a case file with every date filled in. Grace was taken first for medical evaluation, then, once cleared, asked the same question twice by 2 different officials, gently, because they could hardly believe the answer either time. Had anyone at that estate ever laid a hand on her? She said no. Only the door had held her. That was enough. Naomi was not there for the cottage, was not there for the search of Lennox's office, was kept, as she had been kept the entire month, 3 careful rooms away from anything that could touch her directly. She learned of it that evening, from Della, plainly, the way facts were always given to her in that house. "They found her," Della said, "alive. Because of the light you saw. Because of your notebook." Naomi sat with that a long moment, turning her pencil over once in her fingers, and asked the only question that mattered to her right then. "Is she safe now?" "She's safe now," Della said, and for the first time in weeks, meant it completely, without the careful qualifier she had been adding to every sentence about safety, since the day her granddaughter first whispered that a nurse's face did not match a nurse's name. A dated pad, kept by a child who was never asked to keep it, had become, by the end of that week, the clearest timeline in the entire case file, the one document nobody in that house could argue with, because every line in it was simply, exactly true. The arrests did not happen the way television makes them happen. No raised voices, no chase across the lawn. A detective called Grant Lennox's cell and asked him to come to the station to answer questions about a property under his management. He came in his own car. Simone Vance was served at the estate 2 mornings later, mid-morning, by 2 plainclothes officers who showed identification at the front door and asked her, evenly, to step outside for a conversation. She asked for her attorney. They waited for him to arrive before saying anything further. The charges, once filed, were exact and unglamorous: false imprisonment of Grace Adeyemi, conspiracy to commit fraud through a forged power of attorney, unauthorized practice of nursing on Mara Reyes's part, given her suspended certification, endangerment of a vulnerable adult through knowing unlicensed medication management. Mara Reyes was located within the day, at the address on file with the agency's side arrangement, and was taken into custody without incident. She gave a statement admitting she had been hired outside proper channels, paid in cash, and told the badge and the name were just a formality. Now, the forged power of attorney drafts, seized from Lennox's office, were matched against Arthur's medical records and his signed statement from the lucid morning Della had witnessed. A handwriting analyst confirmed what Arthur had already said himself. He had never authorized, and had never signed, any version of that document. The State Nursing Board suspended the agency's regional placement office, pending its own investigation. Once it became clear the background check that should have caught Mara Reyes's suspended certification had simply never been run, an oversight that a proper background check would have made impossible. A judge granted an emergency order the same week protecting Arthur's existing assets and estate documents from any further signature until his competency review, the real one, run by his own doctors, without a deadline set by anyone standing to profit from his fog. Simone's attorney argued, in the earliest filings, that she had believed the replacement nurse was properly credentialed and had no direct knowledge of Grace Adeyemi's confinement. The recorded conversation Naomi had overheard, corroborated later by phone records between Simone and Lennox, undercut that argument before it reached a courtroom. There was no dramatic confession. There was a case file that grew heavier each week, badge photographs, an agency's confirmed silence, a signed statement from a lucid patient, a pill count timeline in a child's handwriting, a bolted cottage door, and a suspended certification nobody had bothered to check. Lennox took a plea agreement 11 weeks later, cooperating in exchange for a reduced charge, and named Simone as the one who had first proposed keeping Grace out of the way, rather than simply firing her and risking questions. Simone's own attorney continued negotiating separately. Mara Reyes received the harshest immediate consequence of the 3, her freedom revoked pending trial, having no family estate, no legal team on retainer, and no leverage left once her cooperation stopped being useful to anyone above her in the arrangement. None of it happened on camera. None of it happened with a crowd watching, or a gavel dramatically striking, or anyone standing to applaud. It happened in filing cabinets, in scheduled hearings, in emergency orders signed by judges who had never met Arthur Vance and did not need to. This is, in my experience, how most true endings actually look. Not a fall from a great height, A quiet stack of paperwork, correctly filed, that a stranger's whole scheme could not survive once it was finally read by the right official in the right order. The estate's side gate, where the pale sedan had once rolled up early and unfamiliar, saw no more of that particular car. Lennox's office sat locked under a different set of keys now, the ones Della had never been trusted with before, and was asked to hold, temporarily, until new management arrived. Arthur's real physicians ran the competency review 3 weeks later, unhurried, unpressured by any deadline but his own recovery. They found him improving steadily now that his medication was, finally, being managed by people with nothing to gain from keeping him foggy. The review changed nothing about his rights and everything about his safety. No more locked folders on his desk waiting for a signature he did not understand. No more badge that lied about the face behind it. Just a slow, ordinary, well-documented return to strength. Grace's case moved through its own separate track, her 12 days of confinement treated by prosecutors as its own serious crime, independent of what had happened to Arthur. A woman's stolen weeks counted and charged on their own terms, not as a footnote to someone richer. Naomi was asked once by a gentle attorney preparing the case whether she would be willing to describe what she had seen, in writing, for the record. She agreed, and dictated it to Della exactly the way she had first said it aloud at Arthur's bedside. "That's not your nurse." Her statement became one more document in a case file that no longer needed drama to be believed. It sat, plain and dated, beside a badge photograph and a pill count, and a lucid man's signature. One more fact among facts. Exactly the kind of witness she had always been. By the time the paperwork finished moving through its ordinary channels, 3 people faced charges, 1 agency faced sanctions, and 1 estate quietly changed its household management from top to bottom. No headline called it a rescue. The court documents simply called it what it was. De Mara Reyes's badge, the one she had worn for weeks, was logged as evidence and never returned to service. It sat, eventually, in a locked drawer in a police property room, one printed name over a face that had never had any right to wear it. Grace Adeyemi's nursing license was formally cleared 6 weeks after the cottage door opened. Every question the state board had raised answered by a case file thick enough to end them. Her suspension had never been about her own conduct. It had only ever been the confusion a stolen name leaves behind. The agency reinstated her with full back pay for every week she had missed, including the 12 locked inside a room she had not chosen, and added a formal letter to her file describing what she had endured in language plainer than most such letters ever use. Held against her will while a stranger practiced medicine wearing her name. Arthur asked, once he was strong enough to ask for anything specific, that Grace be offered her position back directly, if she wanted it, at a rate above her previous contract, with security arrangements at the gate that had never existed under Lennox's management. She came to the estate on a bright morning in early autumn, in her own scrubs this time, her own badge pinned straight, walking through the front door instead of a side gate for the first time since March. Della met her before she reached the stairs. The 2 women had never met. Not properly. Not before that morning. One had cooked in that house for 11 years. The other had been erased from it for 2 months. They stood in the front hall a moment, not quite sure how to begin, and then Della simply opened her arms. Grace's composure, held together through a courtroom deposition and a formal board hearing, and 12 days that had tried to break something in her, did not hold together in that hallway. Her shoulders came down. Her breath caught, then broke, and she pressed her face into Della's shoulder and wept, finally, where it was safe to. Naomi stood a few steps back, drawing pad against her chest out of old habit, watching a grown woman cry the way she had never once let herself cry through the whole ordeal. Grace lifted her head, saw her, and crossed the hall in 3 steps to crouch to the girl's level. "You're the one who wrote it all down," Grace said, voice still thick. "The badges, the dates, the pills." Naomi nodded, unsure what to say to a stranger's tears aimed so directly at her. "I heard you counted the door lock nights, too, the same way I counted the cottage light." "I did," Grace said. "I counted everything I could reach, because it was the only thing I had left that they couldn't take from me." She took Naomi's free hand in both of hers, careful, the way she must have once held a frightened patient's hand 1,000 times before this. "You gave me my name back." It wasn't the badges alone that had done it, and both of them understood that without saying so. It was a 9-year-old's decision, made in a doorway on an ordinary Thursday, to trust exactly what she saw over what a smiling adult told her to believe, instead. Arthur set up, that same month, a fund in Naomi's name at the community foundation downtown. Not payment, he was careful to say, because a child cannot be paid for doing right, only honored for it. The fund covered tuition for children of household staff across 3 counties, quietly, without his name attached publicly to any of it. He also moved, formally and permanently, to secure Della's position at the estate for as long as she wanted it, along with the small cottage house at the edge of the grounds. Not the one that had held Grace, a different one, sunlit, with a garden Della had always admired and never asked for. "You didn't have to do all this," Della told him, the week the paperwork was signed. Arthur, stronger now, sharper by the month, shook his head slowly. "I didn't do enough," he said. "A child caught what an entire staff of adults missed for 2 weeks. I'm only trying to catch up to her." Naomi kept the drawing pad. She did not need it for evidence anymore, but she kept drawing in it anyway. Horses and cartoon animals filling the same pages that had once held 2 photographs of a badge that lied. Some pages, she said, were just for drawing now. That felt like its own kind of ending. "I have told you many stories from many rooms nobody thinks to watch. This is the one I return to most, because the danger in it never wore a mask or raised a hand. It wore a badge with the right name printed on it, and it almost worked, because almost everyone in that house was too busy, too polite, or too tired to look twice. The smallest voice in that sick room carried the largest truth in it. Not because a child has some gift adults lack, but because she had been taught, plainly and repeatedly, to trust what her own eyes told her over what a confident stranger's smile insisted instead. Grace Adeyemi got her name back. Della Okoro got a home that was finally, fully, hers, and a 9-year-old girl who liked drawing horses got thanked, by name, by a millionaire who would have signed away his own protection if she had stayed quiet at the foot of his bed. Courage in this story did not come from size, or title, or money. It came from a habit as small as a pencil and a pad, kept faithfully, on an ordinary afternoon that turned out to matter more than anyone in that house first understood. Never underestimate the person nobody thinks to ask. Never assume the quietest witness in the room has the least to say. Sometimes she is the only one who has been paying attention the entire time, and sometimes that attention is the only thing standing between a good man and the people circling him. If this story reminded you of someone whose eyes see more than the room ever gives them credit for, send it to them today. Tell them what a 9-year-old with a drawing pad managed to do simply by refusing to look away. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, names, and events depicted are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to actual events, is purely coincidental. It is fiction built, all the same, from a truth worth repeating. That watching closely and writing down exactly what you see remains one of the most powerful things a person of any age can do for someone who cannot protect themselves. Somewhere tonight, in a house much like this one, an adult is being too busy to notice something small and true. Somewhere, a child is noticing it anyway. I hope when she finally speaks up, someone in that room believes her the way Arthur Vance believed Naomi Carter. That is the whole of it. A whispered warning. 2 photographs of 1 badge. A grandmother who trusted her granddaughter's eyes over a stranger's practiced smile. And a household finally, quietly, set right, one true fact at a time.